So welcome to the Design Ventura Teacher CPD on preparing to submit. These are some useful things for you to know. The submission deadline is Wednesday, the 26th of February at 5 p.m. So put that in your diaries. You can still sign up for workshops until the submission deadline. And these can be tailored to where you are in the program. So my colleague will share a link to this in the chat now. There's links on the website. Book these. If you're really near the end, you can just book one and come along and get help in how to submit. You can also still enter the mini challenge, and that's open to years 7 to 11. And if you've only recently registered and have had any issues with comms, please reach out. There was a little bit of a technical difficulty in the last month. So these are all the CPDs and webinars that we've delivered so far for this competition. And we're obviously up to here, the finishing up CPD. There's obviously the getting started CPD, and there's recordings of all of these online, webinars on how to research the Design Museum shop, coming up with and testing ideas, materials and sustainability, and communicating ideas. So depending on where you are in the program, give them a watch, because they'll help you with what stage you're at. And this PowerPoint will be up on the website after this, so you'll be able to click all the links and access them directly through this PowerPoint. So what next? This is the finishing up and submitting page of the website, and this is what's on there. So you have you have a workshop and lesson plan for finishing up. You have a how to submit step-by-step guide. There's a practice entry form, which is exactly the same as the online entry form, which you can print off and students can fill out. There's links to the teacher and student evaluation. You need to submit those as part of submitting. So they're really important for us to be able to evaluate the success of the program and report on it. So please, please, please do those. There are also examples of the A3 sheets from all the past winners and links to relevant webinars and blog posts on there. So obviously some of you can see here, these are the different stages. Some of you are a bit more here, but today we're talking a bit about finishing up and submitting, and this is everything on that page that will help you to do that. One important thing to do is to hold a pitching event in your school. So every school submits one idea to the Design Ventura competition. And how do you choose which idea that is? And the best way to do that is to hold your own pitching event. And this allows all of the students to practice communicating their ideas in front of an audience. There are class pitch guidelines that can help you with this. You can hold it in class and the students can vote for their favorite idea. Obviously, they may be a little bit biased, they can't vote for their own. Or you can host it in assembly so the whole school can vote. What can be really nice is to have a judging panel of teachers to give feedback to the students, or even to invite in local professionals or business people to join the judging panel. And on the website, there is the judging criteria, which again, you can download to use to judge each of the ideas in the in-school pitching, and also you can use that when you're submitting as well. It's really helpful if you can to do this in-school pitching event. And then what to include in the pitch. So there's a pitch planner. So students can plan how they would stand up in front of the class or school and pitch their product idea. And it literally gives them sort of sentences to say. We are, and their name, our product is, name of the product, an explanation, our target audience is, and we think they'll like our product because we plan to manufacture our product by, we can reach our target audience through the following marketing, our product will minimize harm to the planet and encourages sustainability because, we think we can make a profit because, and we think the judges should choose us because. So again, if you're holding an in-school pitching event, your students will have had a practice at this before you hopefully eventually get shortlisted and come join us at Deutsche Bank to pitch your ideas. So it'll be a practice run of that. It's also valuable learning for all students to have that opportunity, and it will help hone the ideas also for the submission. And then, so once you've held your in-school pitching event, you'll work with the team that will represent your school on their A3 design sheets and their submission form. So the submission form, you can download it, the practice one. As I mentioned, it's the same as the one online that you'll need to fill in. So they can write it out and then you can do it at a different time, or you could do it with them, alongside them in class to submit. We ask 3 A3 submission sheets, and we'll come on to that in a little bit. So the A3 sheets, things to know. Only 3, please, because we review all of them. So every form and 3 lots of A3 sheets for every submission are reviewed by a shortlisting panel. So these are industry professionals. There's usually a blog post that says who they are and what their experience is. And every school that submits will be given feedback from these judges. So try to make it clear, make it stand out, and make it tell their story, the student's story. If you go onto the website, as I mentioned on that submitting page, there are examples, and you'll see that they're all really different. There is no right or wrong way to do these sheets. No 2 school submissions have ever been the same, and we have received hundreds over the years. They can be done on a computer, they can be hand-drawn, they can be cut out and stuck together. There is no one format that will result in shortlisting or winning. That being said, there are some things you can do to help. So I'm sorry, I don't have a top tip secret that will mean that your school is definitely shortlisted, but these are some of the things that can help. So the first and most important thing is to tell the story or the journey of the idea. So there are 3 A3 sheets, and there are suggested headings for each of these. And these are research and initial ideas, testing and product development, and the final idea. So you can literally follow this in the A3 sheets to tell the story of how the students have come up with their idea. You don't have to, but that is one way of telling that story and journey. Another thing is to tie it all together visually. So to use the same fonts and colors across the 3 sheets. If it's typed up, 2 or 3 fonts, different font sizes maximum, and 1 font will help make it visually easier to understand. As I said, we review all of them, the shortlisting panel, so it's quite a lot. The clearer it is, the easier it's to understand, the easier it is for them to review it. It also helps to create a sense of visual cohesion, brand identity. In the end, this is a product. You're trying to communicate that to the shortlisting judges. And if you want to, you can tie that to the purpose or use of the product. So you can see here, product about bees, the colors, the themes, goes across all 3 A3 sheets. Another thing is you don't need to start from scratch. You can use what you've already done. So students have been doing this project for quite a while, potentially. So they filled out they've done a lot of work on it. Use that to do the A3 sheets. If your students have done the worksheets, they can use those. There is also a student checklist, which you can print out to ensure that they've covered everything in the brief. So the worksheets are the ones that look a bit like this. I don't know if you can see it, but they have the little boxes that you answer. And essentially, it's the same content from there that you need in the A3 sheets. So this is the different worksheets there are. So there's the Design Museum location research worksheet, evaluating branding worksheet, target audience worksheet. They're all really useful for sort of researching the initial ideas. In terms of finishing and submitting, the idea summary worksheet's really useful. And that goes through, get that one up. That goes through, again, it might not be so easy to see, but the student's idea with the answers around. So Who is it for? What does it do? It's a great idea because what does your target audience think? How will it be made? What's already out there? That one's really useful for submitting, for finishing up the A3 sheets. Another one that's really useful is the budget template, to show that your students have done a bit of thinking about the costs of their materials, and how they will work out the costs and that their product makes sense financially. And then finally, like I mentioned before, the student criteria checklist. So that's the one you can see here. It literally goes through the aspects of the brief that they hopefully have answered. And if you're going through this with them and they haven't answered some of that, they can think about it and they can add it into the A3 sheets. Be clear and concise. So not every space, 3 times A3 sheets is quite a lot of space. Not every space has to be filled. They don't need to be scared of empty space. Space can actually make it easier to read and understand, especially when looking at a lot of these over the space of a couple of days. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how different, just flicking back through, these sheets can look. These are only some of them. There is no one right or wrong way to do this, but those are some ideas of how to make the most of those A3 sheets. And then why you should submit. So every student who's taking part in Design Ventura will receive a certificate. So it's not just the submitting students, it's all of the students in your classes who've been taking part. So all of those students that did the in-school pitching, who've been doing all of this work over all of these weeks, they all get participation certificates if you submit. So when you submit, we ask how many students have taken part and we will post you those certificates. All of the submissions will receive feedback from the design experts, so our shortlisting panel. Even if they're half complete, just the start of an idea, it's worth submitting just to receive that feedback from industry professionals and those certificates to show your students what they have achieved. You don't know what else has been submitted. It's always worth submitting because you may actually get shortlisted. So a lot of schools nearly didn't submit and then ended up being shortlisted because they weren't quite finished. They didn't think the idea was strong enough. It is a bit of work, that last submission like phase, but it's really worth doing it because you never know. And yeah, don't be put off by previous winning ideas or submission sheets because you don't know what this year looks like. Every year is slightly different. And also don't let cost put you off. There is support for shortlisted schools for the costs related to the pitching and celebration events. So if that's an issue, we can help with that. So it's really valuable to submit, even if you don't think the idea is that good or it's entirely finished, just to get those certificates, that feedback, and you never know. So how to submit. So you go to the Design Ventura website. There is this button here, submit your entry. You click on that, and then it asks you to log in. So if you haven't really been logging in or using the teacher resources, because all the others are freely accessible recently, and you have any issues, just email ventura@designmuseum.org and they can help you with logons. So say you try logging on, you can't remember your password, you do the forgot password, email comes through or you can't find it, email the Ventura team and they can help you with that. They can either send you a temporary password or they can resend you the link. And then this is what it looks like when you submit. This, like I mentioned, these questions directly reflect the questions in the practice sheet. So if your students have submitted that to you, you can just type it all up. And it will ask you here to complete teacher and student evaluation forms. We ask that the student evaluation forms are for all students or as many as you can get to do it, not just the team, because we want to hear from all of the students who've taken part in this learning, how it's been for them. Kind of like with the in-school pitching, we want all of the students to get as much opportunity as possible to take part and to give us their feedback. And it also asks those costing and budget related questions. So if your students have done the budget sheet, that's really helpful. It's not required, you don't have to submit it, but some sense of costings is needed, ideally. That being said, don't let anything put you off. And then the ideal formats for the A3 sheets is either JPEG or PDF and 3 megabytes maximum. We ask, again, hundreds of schools take part, so we do ask that you put your name on the files so that when they're downloaded our end, it makes things a little bit easier. So for example, Ventura Academy design sheets. Yeah. I'm aware that that's quite a lot of information. We are going to be hearing from Ben Myers at Ferndown Upper School. If there are any questions in the meantime, do put them in the chat and we can come back to them at the end. Ferndown Upper have been the most shortlisted school in the history of the competition. So Ben should have some great tips for you. I'll be doing his PowerPoint, so he can just say, next slide, please, as we're going. And I believe, let me just have a look here. I will just need to pin Ben. So Ben, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, loud and clear. I've got a bit carried away with my animations on my PowerPoint, so it might take a couple of clicks, so apologies.
That is okay. Can everyone still see my screen okay? Ben, can you see my screen?
Yep, yep.
Fantastic, amazing. So I will now pass over to Ben, who will give you a teacher's insight into submitting and shortlisting. Over to you, Ben.
Okay, brilliant. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Well done for staying on and putting up with it. Basically, I got sent an email last week from Alicia asking me to come along, and I've just highlighted a little bit out of it because obviously I was getting a bit anxious about how I was going to go about doing this. My perspective about how I support students during this stage, key things we found work, any do's and don'ts, etc. So hopefully some of those questions you've been putting in the chat, I can sort of help to that. The PowerPoint really that you've just been sort of shown and talked through sort of tells you an awful lot about how to go about doing that. The resources on the Ventura website are fantastic. So this is just pure. I'm going to take you on a little journey of our school's history in Ventura, really, I guess. Next slide, please. I'll go through that. I'll just start off by saying who we are as a school. Um, there we go. So Ferndown Upper School, state comprehensive. We're an upper school, so we get schools with really mixed experiences of art, design, and technology. So obviously that means our curriculum is quite sort of tight, stuff that we do in year nine. And so we've never really been able to get Ventura in as part of the curriculum. So we've done it as an after school club, which makes me even more sort of happy about how well we've done actually. So yeah, so we've run it as an after school club. I know lots of schools run it as part of their curriculum. So it all depends how you go about it. But so some of the stuff that I'm talking about is very relevant to the cohort of students we get, and maybe the time frame and ability of those students, past experiences of art and D&T, really. Next slide, please. So yeah, so these are our ones that got shortlisted. So we were fortunate enough to get 5 years on the trot, which couldn't quite believe. The first one I couldn't believe, and then yeah, and so it got to the stage where it felt like, well, this is like it's almost like guaranteed now. So that put an extra bit of pressure on, and some of the students actually started thinking that they were just automatically going to just be there in February or March or whenever the pitching day was. So yeah, so let's see, we got the finger football at the top. That was our first one, and then build and play there. Got Flip It, which is this design generator book. Bauhaus in a bottle that caught Sebastian Conrad still couldn't quite get over the idea of what the idea of the bottle was. Despite the fact the team was being very, very confident about why they did that. It's just a frame. And the last year's one was this bouncy buddies one. So what we'll do, I'll show you a selection of some of the sheets that those students did to get shortlisted. But we're going to start with one of the teams when I entered, because I entered for a couple of years before that, and hadn't got shortlisted. One time we didn't have the time to get an entry in, and then the first year we got entered, but we just got the feedback we didn't make the shortlist, and maybe we can see why in these sheets. Next slide, please. So yeah, so it says here about how much support students need during this stage. In my experience, students may need a lot of support at this stage because again, maybe that's down to the cohort that we've got, maybe their experience, maybe they're not used to working as a team. They're not used to sort of having set roles and specific jobs to do, and sometimes they sort of lose track of that. Um, Kids aren't always great with deadlines. I'm sure we all know that. So this is sometimes we have that thing where it sometimes feels quite pressured. And I know that might be why some of you might be thinking we're not going to enter it. It's not worth entering it. But yeah, so next slide, and I'll talk you through this one. So this was one that we did in 2017. So there's the three sheets there, and it was a much shorter deadline. I think the first couple of years we did it, I think it was pre-pandemic. I think it was sort of November time. So if you imagine we had students coming to us in September, I had to try and do some sort of announcement in all the assemblies and all that sort of stuff to try and get people to join this after school club and then really try and get them engaged enough to try and get an entry together by November. So it was really quite challenging. So I was a lot more reliant on the resources at the first couple of years. The first few years I entered, I was really relying heavily on the resources that Ventura put together that have been really good. But it was probably a little bit more. I was probably a little bit more formulaic maybe in the way I'd sort of make the students try and do the work. So there's research about the design museum, the briefs on there, research about target audience. There's a couple of products that maybe were on sale at the time in the design museum or were similar products that they could imagine were on sale in the design museum. And then they went straight into sort of sketching and idea development. And there wasn't what I always found there wasn't really enough time to get the modeling done and the prototyping and the idea development. So they might have had a germ of an idea, but they didn't really have time to be able to get that prototype made well enough. And that was ultimately the feedback that was sort of given for that one. So that's the photograph of their final thing, which the idea was, again, it's quite a nice little idea about a game that people could play with existing toys that they could sort of adapt. They could have like a little box that they could make to stick on the top that were like recycling type things, and they could go around this little track and pick things up and stick it in the box. But it wasn't they didn't really have enough time to explore that idea and fully realize it. So yeah, so that one didn't make the shortlist. So if we can go on the next slide, maybe we'll see one that did. Yeah. So again, this is talking about students who needed quite a lot of help. So like I say, that I've found every year that we've ran it, we tend to get students who are really keen, really positive students. Sometimes you get groups of friends that come along that can be really supportive of each other. But no 2 years are the same. So we've had some years where there's been less groups. I think this year there was only the one group. So there wasn't that sense of sort of trying to sort of compete with someone else. We tended to have two groups ultimately because again, it's hard to get students to come after school to do stuff. No matter how well you do at things, it still seemed to be quite hard work. So these guys needed quite a lot of support, and they needed a little bit more of a nudge. So they were able to vocalize their ideas down on that second page with the little triangles. But this is a Morag Myerscough influence, by the way. So I'm a big Morag Myerscough fan. Love the that whenever we've taken design students to the design museum a couple of times, and they're always really interested in that sort of designer maker use the thing that moves around that's got that sort of triangular thing on. And so I was just trying to get these guys just to try and sort of, so rather than giving them boring old post-it notes, I gave them these little triangles in different colours that they could write their ideas on. And then we could collate that at the end. So that's always been my approach, really, to try and get them to be as playful as possible, try and get them to do creative stuff, but then to try and collate it together to tell that story. Because again, that's the important thing. So on one of those triangles, it said something about making something that built together, that stacked, but they didn't really know what they were doing. So I sort of found that thing about Charles and Ray Eames and said, look at that thing, look at that, isn't that cool? Maybe you could do something like that. And they went, all right. And they applied it to an architect. And then that was, they were away there. So again, sometimes you need to nudge them maybe more than you think you're going to have to. You can go on the next slide then, please. Yeah, and this is important. So it really is about the potential of the idea. Next slide again, sorry. So I remember the first couple of things, there was always the talk about so again this is the first one that got shortlisted. It was when the deadline was, again, early deadline, so it was November. The team here were a lot more sort of, that they were more reliant on the computer. So there was one or two people in the team that were really, they liked their drawing, but most of the team were sort of a bit more computery, bit more interested in the financy, the PowerPoint and the businessy side of it, rather than the creative side of it. So again, we didn't really have much time for modeling. It was straight on to just literally, right, do some drawings on some post-it notes. And it was over and over again, do some post-it notes. And I think this illustrates it so well, because there's another one just underneath this thing, that was a Bauhaus. We just, because this was a year 10 group of lads, and we'd just done in class some stuff about design movements, because obviously that's on our specification, designers and design movements. And so on that, I'd say, well, make sure you stick at me, try and link it to a design movement, try and link your product to a design or whatever. And they've got a Bauhaus Rubik's Cube there somewhere. And then this Sam just drew this little beautiful little drawing there, finger football. And it was like, well, how about if we can combine some of these ideas? And then there you go. Suddenly they've got a product that's actually really quite a fun little product. Yeah, and that made the shortlist. So can we go on to the next one? So yeah, so again, it was there was a lot of talk about how, oh yeah, enter because it's the idea. And I was like, yeah, I know, but some of those schools are going to be doing it and they're going to have much more time than us. And they're going to have been, they're going to have their kids from year 7 all the way up to year 9. They're going to be much better than us. So actually, that was the year that really made me realise, well, actually, it is about the idea. Again, use the competition to teach stuff you don't normally get a chance to. So I've used it to teach much more sort of about creative ideas and how to brainstorm ideas and all that sort of stuff. Sorry, next slide again. Sorry. So yeah, I was able to get, this was last year's one. So again, these were two teams of year 9s. We were trying to push it for year 10s ultimately. It took a couple of years of getting shortlisted for my head of department to say, yes, this is going to be really valuable. We can get use this and try and promote it for some of our sort of good year 10 students. And we had that for 1 year where we got a really, really, really good couple of teams that were vying to get shortlisted, the flip book one. This one was last year, so you had two teams of year 9. And we were able to talk about Matisse, we were able to talk about Eric Carl and oh, the American graphic designer, I can't quite remember. So we were able to bring lots of other stuff that I don't have time to talk about in the curriculum. And again, you can see just down here, there's little sort of mind sort of continuation things that I've done from some other CPD thing about sort of making these little sort of connective word spirals and stuff. And again, in the world of sort of GCSE D&T, we don't have that much time to sort of to do stuff like that. And actually, that's the stuff that we need when we're trying to promote that creativity. And again, just at the bottom there, you can see those two little models there. This is like a tin can, and it's got a couple of little rolled up paper, and I think it's got Walter Gropius and some other dude on there, just stuck on a little roller thing. That was someone's pencil topper or something. And right next to it, someone had made this little bouncy flower thing. So then we were able to say, well, okay, look at your beautiful sort of typography there that you did with the cut paper, that Matisse sort of stuff. Look at that. The pencil topper is great, but maybe you can combine it with that springy thing and make a product. Yeah, so that was another fun thing. Um, Next slide, please. So again, I'm in danger of going on too much here. Sorry about this. So next slide, guys. Go with your group. So that's my other advice. So again, you're going to have groups that some of them are going to be much more creative. Some of them are going to be much more into the visual side of it. Sorry, can you go on to the next slide, please? Sorry. And then, like I said, one of the other slides, one of the other teams are a lot more computer sort of, more computer whizzes, I guess. So this is probably my favorite sheet out of all the ones that we've sort of put in. So this was a couple of years ago. This was the flipbook one. I think this one's actually on your PowerPoint. I think sort of about the one of the sort of sheets on there. So all three sheets are on there somewhere. And again, you can see that they got a bit carried away with the Morag Myers-Croft style triangles. We did these little sense things because there was a theme then. So I don't think early on there was a theme. I might be wrong. So the last few years there's been a theme alongside the brief. So again, it's been sort of a lot of old school graphic design stuff, really. So I'm photocopying some of the stuff out of the book that gets sent to you, rather than them having to type it up or write it. What's the point? They can just cut that out and stick it on. I've photocopied down these little sheets that they'd made. So that was about think about some phrases or whatever that are connected to the senses there. Um, and then maybe some products that maybe you could find that were related to that. Maybe there's the brief setter, because I always think it's useful to sort of tie them into that brief setter to have a look at what they do. Because again, they're going to be on the panel. So that was Yuri Suzuki that year. So again, actually, the written research. This is the first page, by the way. This is the written research and ideas and target audience. So when you compare that to that first, if you go on the next slide, if you compare that one to this one, they're very different slides, aren't they? So they both did the job. I think the previous one is the one that again, if you think you're on a panel where you're going to potentially get 50 or 60 things to look at out of however many, because obviously there's 300, I think there's been 350 to 400 schools have taken part in the time that I was entering. So it was always my idea that actually the more sort of visual impact you could make with those sheets, the better, the more memorable those sheets were, as well as having that information. Um, that was that was good for us. And again, some of our students weren't necessarily that great with the finance and the budgeting. No matter how many times you prod them to do it, even the really good mathematicians, they still don't always get that sort of side of it. So they end up sort of putting a little bit on it. But if you've got the other stuff, then if you've got that really good idea, then some of the other stuff, it doesn't necessarily always have to be, 100% in all areas, I think. Next page, please. Yeah, so this is backing up you guys really use the resources on the website, because the website is brilliant and there's loads and loads of stuff. So the first few years I ran it, it was literally just using those resources. I'd print the sheets off, be able to sort of show the videos that are on there a lot. I've used the videos in normal lessons because they've been really useful. Some of the webinars I've put on in normal lessons, because you have some fantastic guest speakers coming in. We had someone from the Pinatex. I always remember the Pinatex and the Lego one a few years ago. They were absolutely brilliant, and I was able to talk about them in GCSE and A-level classes actually. So yeah, and on the next slide, I think it's just got that copy of that slide you showed earlier. So that bit in the middle, that how to submit your entry 24-25 as a PowerPoint, it's got all the dates you need. There's that little film there again, it's got the deadlines and stuff. Just bear in mind, if you are submitting and finishing up, the half term week is that week before it is for us anyway. So you've got to bear in mind when you see your students and about whether you're going to have that time after half term to be able to get everything in, or whether you're better to sort of think, right, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do the practice pitch way before half term, week before half term. So then they get feedback, and then they can act on that the week before half term, because they probably won't be able to do that afterwards. So yeah, that's what I've always found. The half term suddenly sometimes get in the way. Next slide, please. And we're nearly there. Yes, and this is important. Be proud of yourselves because it's a tough thing, isn't it? So next slide. So I've just put a couple of things again. So I was much better at doing this at the beginning. So I put little press releasey things out. I was basically promoting it in school first, but then I've managed to send one off to the local paper and got that in. So again, that was only the second year. Imagine what they'd have said on the fifth year. Could have been, it could have gone national. But but anyway, but yeah, it really does really help to promote the department. Like I say, when we were going through sort of quite a difficult time in that 2017 one, and again, I was trying to sort of use it to teach certain aspects, to try and cover gaps in our learning, our schemes of learning. Um, and yeah, so it worked really well. And again, we could promote that then. Once we had that first year and we got the certificates back, we made that entry, we were able then to use that again. And then obviously when you get into the top 10, bang, you got a little bit more publicity there. So yeah, and again, give yourself a pat on the back, promote yourself a little bit, because we don't get much time to shout about how good we are. So sometimes you've got to do that. Next slide. I think that's it, Ben. There we go. Good luck.